Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather on the last day of May of 2022. I'm David Percy. Up first, we've got had some warm days here across the entire Memorial Day weekend across much of Alaska. But light frost this morning over the Kenai Peninsula in areas, notably Ninilchik down to 29 degrees this morning. Granite there on the Seward Highway. That's before you get to the Sterling Road there, the interchange. That's up, but anyway, that's up on the Seward Highway. Granite again over the Kenai Peninsula, 29 degrees also, and the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge had 31 degrees, and then Soldotna and Kenai Lake south of Moose Pass, and Soldotna both had 32 degrees for an overnight low. Kind of chilly morning for the last day of May. And moving on to the breakup map, all the rivers south of the Brooks Range are open now. And let's see, we've got quite a area of, the entire Noatak River has some open right down to the mouth of the river there. A little bit, mostly ice still in the upper reaches, higher elevations there in the Brooks Range. Otherwise, the Colville River now mostly open. At least over half, the upper half of the river there mostly open, and then the lower half right out to the coast there, it has some open ice. And the Kapparik River, some open ice along the entire stretch, but when you get out toward the beach, mostly ice. And the Sag River, after being in a stationary status quo for about a month, finally started showing some breakup signs, especially yesterday and today, now showing some open just about all the way out, almost out to the coastline, but then becomes mostly ice out toward the beach, like the Kapparik. And so moving on to the fire danger chart, and this is a forecast for tomorrow, June 1st, and it's for spruce. I'd been showing grass, but thought I'd show the spruce fire danger today. And you can see quite an area of extreme fire danger up over the Porcupine and Yukon River area in the Yukon Flats. Also over the area central interior on down to west of the Alaska Range there into possibly the northern Kuskokwim Valley. Some extreme fire danger that's west of Fairbanks, very high into the Fairbanks area and along the north side of the Alaska Range all the way down over toward the border. Also extreme spruce fire danger in the Susitna Valley and a little bit up around Palmer. Otherwise, just mostly high to very high across all of south central Alaska. Even northeast Bristol Basin are in some extreme fire danger there. Copper River Basin in the usual area, very high fire danger. And out toward the lower and mid Yukon River and eastward, pretty high fire danger. But to the west of the Yukon, it really goes medium to low in the cooler air out that way with a little bit of moisture actually. Could see some shower activity moving in overnight tonight or continuing tonight into tomorrow with a weak disturbance. And on to the hazardous weather graphic. The flood advisory remains out for the northern Copper River Basin along the Gulkana River and Lake Louise area. And that's out now until at least through Monday for about another week due to snowmelt conditions expected to continue. The minor flooding there in the northern Copper River Basin. And also a dense fog advisory out for a few more hours for the central coast of the Panhandle. Visibility is down to a quarter mile or less in dense fog. So Sitka, Mount Edgecombe area down to Port Alexander. Looking at dense fog. That could actually continue into tonight as well. And moving on to satellite imagery, you can see that area of low clouds and fog over the Gulf of Alaska. That pulling away from the coastline was up into Cook Inlet, even north of the Forelands. But northerly flow pushed it back down to southern Cook Inlet and into Kachemak Bay a little bit there. East side of Kodiak showing a lot of low clouds and fog, especially at the state airport, but some clearing taking place this afternoon, starting to clear out, especially over Fognak Island, and could go clear at Kodiak at any time if it hasn't already, or at least break out with some sunshine. Had some sunshine along and south of the eastern Aleutians, over the eastern Bering Sea there, southwest of Nunivak Island, and then west of the Pribilofs, quite an area clearing there. A disturbance over the northern Bering Sea, actually you can see here looping it through, kind of lifting northward, and the band of clouds, St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea, extending down into the Yukon Delta and across the Kuskokwim Delta, Togiak Bay. Just mostly mid and high level clouds over Bristol Bay. Another bats of moisture sliding east-northeast along the Brooks Range. Really not much in the way of any precipitation with that, just some scattered light shower activity. Dry for the Panhandle, all the showers now off to the east-southeast in British Columbia. And that very weak front now really falling apart as it pushes, or it stays well south of the forecast area, even south of Kodiak Island, and barely even reaching the Queen Charlotte Islands. But a much stronger storm reaching the Aleutians today, affecting Shemya at 2 on over toward Adak this afternoon with increasing wind and some pretty good rainfall. On the chart, there's a tight pressure field ahead of that front there, southwest of the western Aleutians. Peak wind gusts, Shemya 54 miles per hour so far at mid-afternoon. Adak winds gusting up to about 31 miles an hour with rain from Adak westward to Shemya. Not quite reaching Atka Island yet, otherwise high pressure controlling the Bering Sea. We do have that weak disturbance there, weak low southwest of Gamble, and kind of a trough axis there, bringing some light rain, fog, and drizzle conditions, IFR. Nunivak Island to just south of the St. Lawrence Island area, and that also responsible for the shower activity over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, up over the Seward Peninsula into the Kobuk Valley. Ambler picked up 1/100 of an inch of rain in the last 12 hours, as did Deering. And Marshall had about 4/100 of an inch of shower activity, kind of really widely scattered on the showers. But that probably will tend to increase as that system kicks off to the northeast tonight. The showers should become a little more widespread and maybe a little bit heavier as it lifts off to the northeast. Otherwise, mostly sunny and warm over southern Alaska and the central interior. Temperatures rising in the mid to upper 70s, Tanana Valley and up toward Chena. And Chalkyitsik in the Yukon Flats, same thing, back into the 70s, upper 60s, 70s after the chilly morning over the Kenai Peninsula. As I mentioned, 29 in the Nilchik. Cold spot in the state was 24 up at Dead Horse there on the Arctic coast with light winds there in areas of low clouds and fog. Forecast for tonight, look for more low clouds and fog along the coast of the Panhandle, especially the central and south coast into Dixon Entrance, with areas of IFR extending westward. Could push back into Kodiak Island again, but probably won't get as far north as it did the last couple of nights, staying right along the southern Kenai Peninsula coast out of Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet for mostly fair conditions. And then that low center slides northeastward, bringing areas of light precipitation, Seward Peninsula up to Kotzebue, Selawik Valley, maybe the western Koyukuk Valley to the Brooks Range, but just some light amounts there, anywhere from maybe 5/100 of an inch at the most. Some areas might see a little bit more. Most areas won't see anything. And then that front starts to slowly weaken, but it'll stay windy and wet over Adak and Shemya and Attu, and start to see some rain trying to edge into Atka. Really not a big push to the east with this system at all. Then the one south of Kodiak Island staying south of the forecast area and pushes off to the east-southeast. And looking at tomorrow, that front you can see continues to weaken, maybe bring some rain in the Queen Charlotte Islands. Low clouds and fog along the coast of the southern Panhandle, especially down toward Dixon Entrance. Mostly clear in the north, sunny, warmer up over the northern Panhandle. Sunny, warm day, central southern interior, more showers and isolated thunderstorms for the Yukon Flats area, and Eagle northward to maybe Old Crow and toward Arctic Village. And then quite an area of showers there over the central Brooks Range, eastern north slope, back down to the Seward Peninsula. And for the outlook on Thursday, chance of rain for the Fox Islands, scattered thunderstorms over the eastern interior, sunny and warm, 70s to maybe near 80 or into the lower 80s, some areas of the interior of the state. Nice day over the Panhandle as well. Lows tonight, upper 20s and 30s for the Arctic coast and north slope, 40s and lower 50s elsewhere, and the 30s over the Bering Sea. Highs tomorrow, 75 to 82 in the central interior, as well as the Susitna Valley. Mid to upper 70s inland areas of the Kenai Peninsula, up mid 70s over the northern Panhandle. Lows the following morning about the same as what you see tomorrow morning, really not a whole lot of change there. And highs back well into the 70s interior Alaska, near 80 in the Susitna Valley, upper 70s northern panhandle to near 70 even in the south, and the 40s over the Bering.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Module VFR spreading eastward across the Arctic coast and into the western Brooks Range, and IFR extending from the Bering Strait down across St. Lawrence Island down to St. Paul, St. George. And then with the strong front that's pushing into the western Aleutians, IFR spread to AKwx by tomorrow morning, with marginal VFR from Atka up to the Alaska Peninsula along the Yukon Delta coast, including Nunivak Island. And IFR south of the Alaska Peninsula goes up the east side of Kodiak Island and then eastward to the central and south coast, with marginal VFR in over Prince of Wales Island, Dixon Entrance. Otherwise, VFR for the remainder of the state. And for Wednesday afternoon, marginal VFR spreads east and southeast, into the Brooks Range, and just about covers all of the Arctic coast by afternoon, with IFR spreading into the western and central Arctic coast. IFR holds out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, with marginal VFR, the Alaska Peninsula, especially the Pacific side, and IFR hanging on to the east side of Kodiak Island, but pulling back off the coast of the Panhandle a little bit there. But marginal VFR from Port Alexander in across Prince of Wales Island down toward Ketchikan and Annette and Dixon Entrance. VFR, Brooks Range southward to the North Gulf Coast, Bristol Bay, Shelikof Strait for the interior. Thursday morning, IFR North Slope, Arctic coast into the ocean there, and IFR still from the Bering Strait and southward, St. Lawrence Island, covering most of the Aleutians. Marginal VFR, though, for Adak and Unalaska Islands, as well as the Pribilofs. VFR, Bristol Bay. Marginal VFR, Kodiak Island. VFR from Fognak Island northward, including all the North Gulf Coast, right to the Brooks Range. IFR now pushing back into the coastal areas of Prince of Wales Island. Marginal VFR even farther north and to the east, but the northern two-thirds of the Panhandle staying VFR. For the afternoon, lower conditions down over the southern southeast coast, otherwise good VFR for the remainder of the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast. IFR again, right on the east side of Kodiak Island, Chiniak, Marmot Bay, down possibly, well, not quite to Akiak in the marginal VFR zone. Some IFR, Nunivak Island, St. Matthew Island, marginal for the Pribilofs and St. Lawrence Islands, and then from Nunivak Island westward, mostly IFR, some scattered areas of marginal VFR. IFR for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. VFR in the interior passes tomorrow with moisture spreading in from the west and northwest. VFR flying conditions become marginal, deteriorate to marginal during the day for Anatuvik and Adigan as well. Maybe taking a little longer for Adigan, but both are going to show a downward trend. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, another VFR day coming up. Western Alaska Range and rainy, looking really good. Windy, VFR, either approach. Isabel, VFR. Mentasta, another VFR flying day there. Tanita, VFR. Portage, VFR. And chalk up another VFR day for Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels, upper level ridge over western Canada, ridging in across the mainland Alaska area. So we've got 8 to 10,000 foot freezing levels, and then slowly falling back to about 4,000 feet on the eastern Arctic coast, 8,000 feet Alaska Peninsula into the central Aleutians. And for icing, with that strong front out west there, areas of considerable moderate pushing in along in advance of the front, lifting north of the western Aleutians during the afternoon, and then along the front back down toward Adak and Amchitka. Icing increases over Atka. Otherwise, just a glancing blow for Prince of Wales Island with that system, weakening front spreading in with a big push toward the Queen Charlotte's there, and then some possible mixed icing up along the Arctic coast into the North Slope, trailing back toward Kotzebue. Jet stream, upper level low coming across the Bering Strait, so west winds across St. Lawrence Island 70 knots, turn southwest 70 to 80 knots up over the northern interior. East 30 knots, turn northeast 50 knots near Kodiak Island, south 50 to 60 knots there. Southern Bering Sea, 85 knots just south of the western Aleutians, 40 to 60 knot winds out over the Aleutians, east 35, the Alaska Peninsula, west 40 for the North Slope there. and about 40 knots, southern panhandle, 3,000 feet, 55 to 60 knot winds there for the Aleutians, 25 Kodiak Island, west 25 for the Arctic coast. Moderate chop, Atka Island, west to Shimian at 2, light to isolated moderate for the Arctic coast.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And once again, you brought some wonderful satellite pictures to show us and do a little show and tell about. It's just amazing. I can get lost in satellite pictures all day. What did you bring today?
Right. Well, weather satellites, what are they good for? Yeah. Of course, there's the pretty pictures that they bring us. You know, we've got a picture here from April of 2012. Okay. The Sumi NPP satellite, it's what they call a polar orbiter, which means it covers Alaska because we're near the pole. Beautiful image. You can see a storm off of southeast Alaska, the sea ice along the Bering Sea up into the Arctic. A really nice picture, and this is important because it allows a forecaster to see where the storms are, where the ice is, where the clear areas are. You need to know where the weather is now if you're going to forecast it into the future. Exactly. So satellites give us these good pictures. This is called surveillance of the weather. And you know, that same satellite also has another picture from a little more recently, August of 2014, Tropical Storm Iselle bearing down on the Hawaiian Islands. Okay. Hawaii doesn't get hit by a whole lot of tropical storms or hurricanes. Sometimes it does. And here's a picture from the same satellite, the Sumi NPP Polar Orbiter. It shows Tropical Storm Iselle approaching the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast. You can see the storm swirling away there, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. This is a tropical storm, not quite as strong as a hurricane because we don't see the eye wall in there. This is still a serious weather system. And all of this information comes just from that satellite picture. It's so much information, and it's wonderful to look at. You see the beauty and the awe of nature right there depicted in that weather satellite. We call it a polar orbiter because the satellite flies high over the globe. Maybe we could look here at we happen to bring the planet Earth with us. This is our satellite. A polar orbit flies really close to the Earth, maybe 800 kilometers over the Earth, and goes up over the pole and then back down, and then the Earth spins under the satellite as it goes by. That's in contrast to the geostationary birds, which are much further out. And they don't view Alaska quite as well. So we love those polar orbiter satellites here in Alaska.
So when we're a lot closer, we get much better details and imagery and an idea of a better maybe position of what's going on when it's passing right over Alaska or right over Hawaii.
Yes, exactly right. The polar orbiter gives such a good view of places like Alaska. And because it's close to the planet, there's another aspect of satellites in the polar orbit that is helpful for weather forecasting. It's an aspect that's maybe not as immediately obvious as the pretty pictures that we see. And that is the capacity for the satellite to produce what's called a sounding. That is finding the vertical profile of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere. We've all heard of weather balloons. Weather balloons are launched here in Alaska twice a day at a number of airports, everywhere from Barrow to St. Paul Island to Kodiak, Anchorage and Fairbanks, Yakutat, a number of places. Launch these balloons, and we've got a picture of a balloon being launched at an airport, and the balloon goes up. It's pulling a little package, an instrument package with it that reports temperature, pressure, humidity data back, and we use that information to help feed what are called numerical weather prediction models.
The models.
The models, right. It's a mouthful, so we just call it the models. And these computer simulations, these models are computer programs that simulate the motion of the atmosphere. Well, how does a model know what the future will be like? You have to tell the model what things are like now. And you give it all kinds of information, including information from these satellite sounders. Very important. Just how important are they? We have a comparatively recent study that really brings home, and this is Superstorm Sandy. We have a track image here of the track of Hurricane Sandy. It was down in the Caribbean around Cuba, and then it moved north over the ocean, offshore of the eastern seaboard, and then at the last minute, Sandy made what's called the left hook. It turned hard to the left and slammed into New Jersey. Was a major problem for the mid-Atlantic states, a calamity. It fused with another weather system and became known, this is not an official title, but Superstorm Sandy. It was quite the weather event. Well, the modelers, after the event, there's a group of modelers in Europe. They have a very good model, a frustratingly good model if you're the Americans trying to pursue their excellence. They reran their model afterwards in what's called a data denial study, where they kept everything the same. So this is 6 months after Sandy, but they went back, they reran the same model, they fed the model the same initial conditions, that is telling the model, okay, here's where we think Sandy is, down near Cuba in the Caribbean. Everything was the same as it was in the real forecast, except they didn't let the model know.
No satellite data.
No satellite data. So we're going to put that over here, no satellite data for you. The resulting forecast 5 days out, back when the real Sandy was happening and the model had the satellite data, the forecast was pretty good. We've got a graphic here on the left side. We show the forecast of where Sandy would be, and that's the red bullseye on the left. It's just south of where it actually wound up hitting. Not a bad forecast from this computer simulation, 120 hours out. On the right, you see the same model, but it didn't have the satellite data to help it understand things. And the storm is way offshore. It misses. The forecast is more accurate when the model has the satellite data. So that's the idea today we want to convey, is weather satellites. They're important because they show us the pictures of where storms are. We see good examples of this. Yeah, the surveillance right now, it's great to look at those pictures. And in addition, behind the scenes, maybe not immediately obvious, but the models have to have that satellite data for them to be good forecasts. And then a meteorologist uses that information to help everyone with the forecast of where the storms will be in the future.
That is fascinating information that we can look at, see where things have been, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. That's that old adage there. But seeing that satellites are actually helping us move forward in the weather information system is pretty amazing stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to check out Eric's satellite images that he's been talking about, whether that's something from today or last week or even much further back in Alaska history, you can easily do that yourself. Go to www.gina.alaska.edu and you can find those images there. Eric, thanks so much for joining us once again. And again, we will join you hopefully again soon for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, where you'll tell us more really cool information about the satellites over our heads in Alaska. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Looking at Tuesday's sea ice analysis, just completed. You can see really fading away, the ice fading away. Just about wide open there in Norton Sound, some heavier ice there in the western part of the sound, and on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, but the entire area there is slowly melting away and will continue to do so over the next several days and throughout the summer. Moving on to the coastal water forecast. Light variable winds for the central and north coast on Wednesday, 5 to 10 knots, seas running 6 to 7 feet. East winds at 10 knots on the south coast with 7-foot seas. Light variable winds for Clarence Strait, and for the central and northern inner channels, north winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Outlook for Thursday, west to north winds 10 to 15 knots for the central and south coast with 5 to 6 foot seas. Northwest at 15, seas 5 feet for the north coast. And for the northern and central inner channels and inside waters, winds will be north at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Clarence Strait, light southeast breeze at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, northwest winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 10 knots with seas around 7 feet. For the Barren Islands, small craft advisory due to those 8-foot seas. Otherwise, looking at light variable winds there at 10 knots. Light variable winds for Kamishak Bay with 2-foot seas. Cook Inlet, variable to south winds at 10 knots with 2 to 3-foot seas. And this light wind pattern continues through Thursday across the area. Variable to west winds for Cook Inlet at 10 knots, seas slight. Also variable winds at 10 knots for Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, and the North Gulf Coast with seas running anywhere from 4 to 5 feet. Prince William Sound, variable to northwest breeze at 10 knots. Kodiak Island, northeast winds 20 knots, seas 6 to 8 feet for the day Wednesday. From Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, northeast 20 knots, seas just under 10 feet, but lighter and more variable. Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, 10-knot winds with 2-foot seas. In Bristol Bay, light northeast breeze at 10 knots. For Bristol Bay on Thursday, winds will go westerly at 15 knots. Seas won't change much, about 2 feet. Light variable winds for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, Pacific side, east at 15 knots. And for Kodiak Island on Thursday, light variable winds at 10 knots with 2 to 5 foot seas. On Alaska Island, or actually on Alaska and Unmak Island, Fox Islands, east-northeast winds 20 knots on Wednesday with seas running 4 to 9 feet. Gale warnings for Adak and Atka, east winds 35 knots, seas 9 to 15 feet, and gale warnings for Amchitka Island as well for easterlies at 35 knots. Lighter winds from Kiska to Shemya. Small craft advisories though for east winds at 30 knots, seas still up around 15 feet. And for Thursday, small craft advisory, Shemya to Kiska, north winds 25 knots, Amchitka Island, east winds at 20. And then kind of a squirrely wind pattern there for the Fox Islands, Pacific side south at 20, Bering Sea side east 25, Unamak Island, small craft advisories, east-southeast winds 25 knots, Unalaska Island, east winds at 20. For the southwest coast Wednesday, north winds 10 to 15 knots. St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, west winds 10 to 15 knots with slight seas. And for the Pribilofs, northeast breeze at 15 and east 15 for St. Matthew Island. For Thursday, light winds for Norton Sound, light winds also for St. Lawrence Island, out of the north at 10 knots, and northerlies at 20 knots for the Yukon Delta coast, northeast 20 for St. Matthew Island, 15-knot winds for the Pribilofs and the Kuskokwim Delta coast. For the eastern Bering Sea, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, southeast winds Wednesday at 20 knots, west winds 20 knots for the central coast, and about 15 out of the west on the west side. And from Wales to Cape Thompson, west winds 15 knots. Southerlies 15 to 20 knots from Wales to Cape Beaufort on Thursday. Otherwise, west winds at 20 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, system upper troughs sliding eastward will spread moisture in from the west and southwest, bringing areas of light rain, fog, and drizzle, Seward Peninsula, and showers into the Selwyn, Kobuk Valley, maybe the western Koyukuk Valley, up to the west central Brooks Range. Not much of anything north of the Brooks Range there for the Arctic coast. And wind and rain continue to increase slowly, but not really edging too fast to the east there with that front right up. It keeps windy and wet with gale warnings out for the western central Aleutians. Low clouds and fog mainly offshore, and that continues into Thursday. Not much change, still warm over the interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.